Hello guys, welcome to another video. This is one of the most important videos on this channel if you want to move to Western Europe. In this video, we're going to talk about Portugal and Spain. More precisely, Portugal versus Spain. We are going to compare these two European countries in a number of categories, including the job market, cost of living, real estate, visa and residence permits, taxes, weather and climate, infrastructure and entertainment. And then, hopefully, we will help you to decide which country is the best option for your needs and aspirations. And before we start with the actual content, if you want to travel, move or invest abroad, you know what you have to do. Hit the like button and, most importantly, subscribe. Let's start. Both Portugal and Spain are among the most desirable places to live, work and retire in the world. While Portugal and Spain share a number of similarities, they also have important differences, and we are going to compare the similarities and the differences between Portugal and Spain in this video. Both countries are located on the Iberian Peninsula, but looking at the map, you can see where the differences start. Spain is much larger in territory and population than Portugal. Only the metro area of Madrid has a population of around 7 million inhabitants, while the whole of Portugal has a population of 10 million inhabitants. Spain is also much wealthier than Portugal, both in terms of total GDP as well as in GDP per capita. One strong similarity that these countries have is that they both rely heavily on the tourism industry, which is one of the main job providers in both Portugal and Spain. And with this, we're going to start our comparison. Firstly, let's compare the job market in both Portugal and Spain. One of the most significant differences between the Spanish job market and the Portuguese one is the minimum salary. While the minimum salary in Portugal is currently of 665 euros per month, in Spain it is of 1,100 euros per month, both gross figures. So if you're considering coming to one of these countries to do a more unskilled job, you're probably better off in Spain. However, it is significantly more difficult to find a job in Spain, because the unemployment rate in Spain is among the highest in the European Union. Another advantage of Portugal is that if you come as a tourist, there is an easy path to get a residence permit if you find a job and get a contract while in the country. In Spain, this is much more complicated, and oftentimes the most common option is to apply for a work permit and a visa in your country of origin. But Madrid and Barcelona have more international companies headquartered there as opposed to Lisbon and Porto. To sum it up, in Portugal it is easier to get a job, but it is in Spain that the highest paying salaries are. Now let's talk about the cost of living in both Portugal and Spain. In terms of cost of living, Spain is more expensive than Portugal, but it depends whether we are talking about real estate or groceries, so let's get into that. The least significant difference between these two countries in terms of cost of living is groceries. Groceries in Spain are just slightly more expensive than in Portugal, usually ranging from 10 to 20%. Services are significantly more expensive in Spain than in Portugal. So if you're going to a barber shop or take care of your pet, this will be almost always more expensive in Spain. Madrid, Barcelona and Lisbon are the most expensive cities in the region, but if you go to mid-sized cities in Spain or even Porto in Portugal, the cost of living is considerably lower. If we consider the parity between salaries and the cost of living, Lisbon is currently the most expensive city in all of Portugal and Spain, and we can't talk about cost of living without talking about real estate. Currently, Madrid and Barcelona are the most expensive places between Portugal and Spain to buy and rent properties. Prices per square meter range from 3,000 to 5,000 euros depending on the region of the city in Madrid and Barcelona. In Lisbon, prices range from 2,500 euros to 4,500 euros per square meter, depending on the area. Almost everywhere else, with a few exceptions like Ibiza and Bilbao, prices are much lower in both Portugal and Spain. In cities like Porto and most mid-sized cities in Spain like Zaragoza and Sevilla, you can find properties ranging from 1,000 euros per square meter to 2,500 euros per square meter. If you want to invest in real estate in both of these countries, rental yields usually range from 4 to 6% per year. In both countries, properties are much cheaper in the countryside, but if you're aiming at the coast, I consider Spain to have the best opportunities. Now we're going to talk about visa and residence permits. In terms of visa and residence permits, Portugal also has an advantage, but Spain also has pretty interesting visa options. Firstly, if you are an EU citizen, you don't really have to worry about visa and residence permits. You can just come to the country and register your stay. If you are a non-EU citizen, then you have to worry about this. If you are a retiree and you are considering one of these countries, the good news is that you can get a residence permit in both Portugal and Spain as a retiree. The bad news is that in Spain you need to have much more funds to be eligible to apply as a retiree than in Portugal. The pension requirement changes every year, but currently in Portugal it's under $1,000 per month and in Spain is about $2,500 per month. There are good visa options if you are a remote worker in both Portugal and Spain. So if you are a digital nomad and you work for a US company, you can get a residence permit to live in Portugal or Spain as long as you meet the minimum income requirements. And finally, the bureaucracy in Spain is much higher. As I said before, if you come to Portugal as a tourist, you get a job contract, you can get a residence permit. This process is much more complicated in Spain. And then, if you live in Portugal for 5 years, you can already apply for citizenship. In Spain, it is much more complicated. It usually takes 10 years. But there are some exceptions. Now we're going to talk about taxes. Taxes in Portugal and Spain are quite high and are comparable to most Western European countries. Personal income is subject to a progressive tax rate system, and the highest rates are above 40% in both countries. The most significant difference here is that Portugal has the non-habitual residence program, which can be a great option to pay less taxes, but the advantages are decreasing over the years and not all types of income are exempt from taxes. Now we're going to talk about weather and climate. We are only considering the weather and climate of mainland Portugal and Spain. As you know, Portugal has Azores and Madeira, and Spain has Ceuta and Melilla and the Canary Islands. Let's start with Spain. Spain has a much more diverse climate than Portugal. It has an oceanic climate in the north where it is more rainy and windy, but the advantage is that summers are rarely excessively hot. Then the center of Spain has a continental climate. These areas of the country suffer the most when there's a heat wave. Then there's the south of Spain, which is the most appealing region for most retirees due to its Mediterranean weather. Portugal, on the other hand, has mostly a Mediterranean climate. The coastal areas of Portugal have the best climate in the country, as the sea regulates the temperature. It rarely gets too cold or too hot, but it often can get too windy. The north of the country has the most mild summers, while in the countryside, especially close to the border with Spain, is where heat waves can be pretty extreme. Now we're going to talk about infrastructure, which is a pretty difficult aspect to compare considering that Spain is several times bigger than Portugal. Both countries have a high-speed rail system and it is easy to fly from anywhere in Europe to many cities in both Portugal and Spain. There are also direct flights from both Portugal and Spain to North and South America. If you're coming from Asia though, it's more complicated. There are almost no direct flights with a few exceptions. Just a few regions of both Portugal and Spain are underserved in terms of transportation and infrastructure. In Portugal that would be the area close to the border with Spain, and in Spain that would be some areas in the inner part of the country and some areas in the north. And the last category we're going to compare is entertainment. Both Spain and Portugal are, in my opinion, some of the best countries in the world in terms of entertainment. Beaches, nightlife and restaurants are among the highlights of both Portugal and Spain. The difference here is that you will spend much more money for entertainment in Spain than in Portugal. But the options are pretty comparable in both Portugal and Spain. You only have to be careful if you live in a very secluded area, for example. If you live in a very small town or in a rural area, far away from a big city and without good transportation options, then your entertainment options will be heavily restricted. To sum up, the main differences between Portugal and Spain are: it is much easier to get a residence permit in Portugal if you are a non-EU citizen. Cost of living in Spain is significantly higher. And another thing that I didn't mention before is that the Spanish language is relatively easier to learn than Portuguese. Even if they are both Romance languages and have a high degree of similarity, the grammar and pronunciation of Spanish is quite simpler. That's it for today's video. If you want to travel, move, or invest abroad, check the links in the description, hit the like button, check our other videos. We have a lot of videos if you want to move to different countries, and most importantly, subscribe! See you next time!